So actually, what I was planning to talk about really fits in quite well with Charles's talk, as you'll see later. Because it's also experimenting because of the lack of clear skies with this camera. It's actually intended as a planetary imaging camera. It's quite small, but because of the sensitivity of it, I've been able to do some quite interesting things beyond just planetary imaging. And that you can, take some stunning astrophotos of nebulae and things, and it's not really intended for that. It's more for planets. But as you'll see later, I've been able to get some all sky views, which are quite interesting, and set it up very quickly and take pictures of the sky so that I can then go indoors where it's warm. I'm not standing out in the cold, and have a look and see what I got. And the way I use it in 3 configurations. I got it, I just stick it on the back of a Celestron SCT. It's mainly for planets. I put it in on a solar scope for taking pictures of the sun, and just on a simple photographic tripod. And that's something I experimented with and found I managed to get it to work quite well, which I'll talk about later as we go on. But it's a fairly high resolution. It's a CMOS sensor, and there's been a huge improvement in CMOS sensors recently. I mean, they're comparable to CCDs, if not better. Certainly a lot faster. But I've listed the things that I've used it for. You can do some deep sky imaging with it, but it's not intended for that. It's actually intended for planetary imaging. But I've been able to do some other things, as I will talk about as we go along. And wait a minute. I seem to be, hang on. Yeah, so this shows the quantum efficiency curve, which is interesting because it's something I hadn't realized before. I went to a talk, I think it was even with this club, where someone was talking about modifying your DSLR camera to remove the infrared filter. And I thought, well, I didn't really fancy wrecking my camera, but I wasn't even quite sure why that would be relevant. And in fact, if you look at the filter colors, you'll see that they merge around 850 nanometers. So at 850 nanometers, what you get essentially is a high resolution mono camera. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. The way the sensor is set up, it's what's called a Bayer filter. So you have alternate pixels go red, green, green, blue, and then it interpolates between them to get the color values for the different pixels. But at 850 nanometers, essentially what you've got is a mono camera. And what I do with it is I can take video and then use my own processing options to interpolate to get the data out of it. And then I can normally, if I want to, for planetary imaging, I make an AVI video file which goes into Registack. But I can also make a whole series of TIFF files, which is something that I realized and is what led me to use it to make all sky views, which seemed to work out actually in the end quite well. So for planetary imaging, just some examples of what you can do. That's obviously Jupiter. And I think you can just see the red spot if you use your imagination. Saturn. And this is what it's actually designed for, as planetary imaging. But then I use it for solar imaging, where you're basically only using the red pixels essentially, but it's still, I find I still get some pretty good results. And that's at 350 millimeter focal length. So it's got almost half a degree, it pretty much gets the sun in of field of view. And these are some other shots. I took, there's a solar flare close up, and there's another solar flare. These are using it to take, as it's intended to be used, just to take videos and then stacking them in registacks. But the thing that interested me was that I thought, well, it doesn't, it's called a camera, but it's not really a camera. I mean, it's just a sensor. It doesn't come with a lens. The lens is the telescope. And I thought, well, what happens if I put a lens on it, as you can buy very cheaply? I got a 2.5 millimeter lens, which is intended for CCTV. And I thought, well, what happens if I take 2 shots of the sky 20 minutes apart, which corresponds to about 5 degrees of movement? I mean, conventional wisdom is to photograph the sky is you need a tracker, a tracking mount. And I thought, well, Deep Sky Stacker, and there's another program I use called Pixel Processor, which actually it's a piece of paid software, but I find it's even better. It's very good at aligning images. And I thought, well, I wonder if instead of putting it on a tracking mount, I just put it on an ordinary camera mount, you know, just a regular photographic mount, and take a whole series of fairly short exposures and then integrate them. Will it work? And surprisingly, it did. Here you can see quite clearly. You can see the Milky Way. This is about 300 frames, which I stacked using that software I showed earlier, which instead of making a video output, I turned it into a whole series of TIFF files. And you can see, I mean, you can actually see the fuzziness of the Andromeda galaxy, and then I put this insert in, which actually I took with my telescope, but you can still get a fairly good view of the sky. You can see the constellations, which I got. I just fed it into the astrometry site on the internet, and it just comes back with the constellations for you. And then as I said, when I said how it sort of fits in with what Charles was talking about, here's an all sky view I took. Again, it was a whole series of stacked images, about 2-second exposures over about 20 minutes. And the conditions were not ideal because there was a street lamp right there, which sort of messed up my field of view. But you can see, well, actually, with a little bit of creativity, you can't really see it on the screen, but with a little bit of creativity, I managed to identify Ceres, the dwarf planet, Uranus and Neptune. And also, but Charles was talking about that double star system in that cluster, whatever it's called, next to Theta, I think it is, which you can actually see.
Yeah, it's Planetary.
Yeah, you can actually see it. It's there. So, you know, this is a sort of way of, oh, and there's the Pleiades as well. You can sort of go out, just set up a regular tripod, which takes there's no bother at all. You just stick it out, set up the computer, take a whole series of frames, stack them, and then come back indoors and see what you've got. And then, yeah, this meteor. So here's, you could, I don't know if you can see the meteor I got there. Is that coming out? And then there's a
yes, it is.
A still layer of the streak, but there's a video. I just caught it. that's the quadrantids, which I took in January. And then the other thing I was talking about earlier was infrared. So I got an 850 nanometer filter to cut out everything this side of 850 nanometers. And if you look at the black body radiation, you can see you're getting 750, I think, nanometers, I think, is typically considered about the limit of the visible. But you can see at 850, you're still getting quite a signal. So, but at 850 nanometers is much less susceptible to atmospheric distortion, scattering. So I tried that, and that was a shot I took of the moon the other night through my telescope with the 850 nanometer filter on. And this is actually also what I did to that earlier. The one of the moon was taken through the telescope, but the filter doesn't actually fit on the camera lens, which screws into the sensor housing. But what I found actually is that the nose that is designed to go into the 1 1/4 inch aperture in the telescope just fits neatly over the barrel of the lens, which is here. So I was able to put the filter on the 2.5 millimeter lens, and I just took, that was just to demonstrate the other night. It was pretty much through pretty thick cloud. I still managed to get quite a reasonable shot of the sky. I haven't really analyzed that actually to see what it is, but you can still, and again, that is the whole series of stacked images. So this is sort of kind of using the all these with the lens, using it in a way that it's not really intended to be used at all, but I seem to have had some success in getting these all sky views. You know, for someone who doesn't have a tracking mount, so they've got just a regular camera tripod and a laptop, you can actually get some quite good results, which I think, you know, is largely due to the fact that the sensitivity of the sensor is so good now. It's about, I think it's the quantum efficiency curve gives you essentially the number of photons you need for the number of free electrons. I think it's about 60–70%. So you get roughly 6 or 7 electrons for every 10 photons, which is pretty good. I mean, it's orders of magnitude greater than what you get, for instance, on film. So you can do this in fairly short periods of time without having to go and sort of stand out in the cold. You know, set it up very quickly. If you go, that's what I did. I saw it was a bit of clear sky, or the moon appeared the other night. I just went out and took a picture, and then I took that picture of, I went up this one. I just went up the hill here and just sort of took that picture of the sky, and then came back to see what I got. So I didn't have to stand there in the cold, which, and I was, it was, I'd say, able to come back and just analyze it in comfort. I think that's pretty much it. So, anyone have any questions? Any questions?
That's pretty amazing, Richard.
That
Well,
was impressive.
I thought it was interesting that someone who, let's say someone didn't have a telescope. I mean, that is just a basic camera tripod with the camera, and the lens was about $30. And I kind of like challenging convention, and convention is you need a tracking mount. I thought, well, let's see if I can manage without one. Let's move the frames instead of moving the camera, and then line them up later, and it worked.
Good job.
So there we are.
Yeah, the sensitive camera makes opens up lots of new avenues.
Well, it does. I mean, it's here. I mean, I think it's I think that's a relative curve. It says AU, which I think means arbitrary units. So I don't think that's absolute, but it's still pretty efficient. I think it's about 60 or 70%, I think. And it's fast because CMOS is much faster than CCD.
Yeah, you said 9 electrons per
about 6 or 7, well, 60%, I think. So I think it's about something like 6 or 7 per 10 photons.
Okay, because I was with the CCD camera the other day, which was 2.3. So.
Oh, yeah, well, it's more sensitive then.
No.
But
it's also a lot more expensive.
Sorry?
It's also a lot more expensive.
The CCD?
Yeah. Well, the one I was looking at, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this was only, well, actually, I think I got it from Ontario Telescope. When I got it, I think it was about 350. I looked the other day, I think it's gone up to 389 or something. But, I have a deep sky camera. I mean, that was $1,500. And it's slow. I mean, this is video. So you basically, but it's video where you can set the frame rate and the exposure time to, let's say, 5 seconds, and then run video I had it about 2 or 3 seconds, and then at about 1 frame, well, the maximum frame rate, so 1 frame every 3 seconds, let's say, and then you get a video. But if you use the PIP, Planetary Image Preprocessor, you can do your own debayering, or if you're in the 850 nanometer range where you're not using the debayer, you can switch that off, and then you can change the output from video to a whole stack of TIFF files, which will go into a deep sky stacking program.
So when you're using it in that mode, are you doing any binning subsequently?
No, I didn't bin it. It's not binned. It's just
This is just raw, 1 by 1.
It's 1 by 1, yeah. But at an 850 nanometers, if you cut everything to the left of this line, well, you basically, where's it gone? You basically got a mono camera. You can ignore the Bayer matrix.
Yeah.
So they pretty much coincide here.
Yeah.
Well, they do at 850s here.
So technical astronomy.
Well, I thought it was interesting because as I say, I thought for someone who doesn't, I mean, setting up a telescope takes time. You got to align it. Someone just wants to take a picture of the sky. Just a laptop and put it on just a regular camera mount, and away you go. As I say, you move the frames rather than the camera.
Yeah.
Same result in the end as long as you align them.
Yeah. Any other questions? That was a great picture of the moon, by the way.
Yeah, that was just the other night. Just about a few days ago.
That's all that was worth looking at.
Yeah, and that was with the 850 nanometer filter.
Yeah. I've been doing the same sort of work with filters, but at the other end of the spectrum on the microscope.
On the UV, yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I had, as I say, I remember someone was talking once about modifying your DSLR. First of all, I didn't know why it had an infrared filter. Well, now it's obvious.
It probably was me because
yeah, it's obvious because the infrared, they all become transparent.
Yeah.
But you know, you don't need to do, if you get this camera, you don't need to do that. It's already, because it doesn't have an infrared filter. You can, and then you can put an infrared pass filter on, which is what I did.
Any more questions?
No, but I think James has a modified camera, DSL camera too. James McWilliams.
Yeah, well, I just didn't. I used my camera for regular photographs. I didn't want to wreck it.
You can theoretically you can modify it yourself, but it's not recommended. And you not only have to take the infrared filter out, but you also have to replace it with a plain glass equivalent. Otherwise, the autofocusing mechanisms don't work anymore.
Yeah, well, as I say, this is I think it's $380 now, and it gets about 100 degrees field of view at 2.5 millimeters. So if you're doing all sky, and with the solar scope is 350 millimeters, and that gives me about half a degree. Just fits in the sun.